Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks. One thing I really love about gear in the Elder Scrolls Online is that viable options come from all different types of gameplay. Some of the craftable sets and the tradable sets found in the Overland are still used in even the highest levels of difficulty that the game has to offer. Gear stats are not necessarily linear with content difficulty like they are in some games, but instead ESO chooses to have a gearing system where the bonuses from the different sets are more or less designed to fit a certain role or situation, leading to lots of different gear options being really attractive to collect if you want to be able to optimize for the many different types of encounters in the game. That isn't to say that the harder content doesn't have gear worth grabbing, it definitely does, but compared to most other MMOs, or really probably most games in general, the gap is actually pretty small between the gear that you can easily acquire early on and the gear that you get from veteran or veteran hard mode challenges. There are certain sets that can drop in a perfected version from these harder challenges, but the perfected bonus lines are very small, ranging from roughly a 1% to a 2.5% or so increase, depending on what stat is rewarded for that particular set and what your current overall stats are at. And then on some other gear, some of these perfected stat lines actually make zero difference in your damage output, as they might increase a stat like resource recovery. So it is still a nice thing to shoot for and feels good when you finally grab these perfected versions, but very far from necessary to have them in order to engage in harder content. There is no real gear score, and you aren't hard locked or soft locked out of higher difficulties if you don't have certain gear sets. You still want a competent setup for sure if you are going to push some harder content, but player skill matters so much more. You could take a group of great players and put them in all craftable and overland gear, and if they're skilled enough, they can still complete all levels of content in the game. And that said, of course, it may be a little slower and less efficient than if they had the complete pool of other sets to work from too, but the point is, getting good definitely matters more than getting that next gear set. So not only is the difference in the easy or hard to get gear rather small, sometimes a gear set that you can craft or easily purchase from a guild trader is just straight up better than a dungeon or trial set for a particular type of usage. It's all about mixing and matching these gear combos together situationally, depending on your class and what type of content or encounter you're facing. So you don't end up with that same dopamine treadmill in ESO like in some other games where you just constantly see your stats go up and up with better gear, but in the long run, I think the Elder Scrolls gear system is so much more interesting than many of those others, as you end up with hundreds of sets to choose from, of which many can be useful for many different situations. And you don't have that constant feeling of knowing that everything you're working on will be invalidated with the next wave of gear in the coming patch. Of course, there are always exceptions, but gear in ESO generally stays relevant for a really long time. So in this video, I'll go through my top 10 options for PvE DPS gear that you're able to grab right out of the gate to help you start progressing further into the game. So all of these sets listed will be either craftable or lootable sets that only bind to your account if they are equipped. So everything here can be purchased with gold from a guild trader and no farming is required at all. And as I alluded to earlier, a lot of these won't just be stepping stones to get to better gear later, but you'll have reason to keep some of these setups in your arsenal all the way to the end game. I will be doing a separate video in the future for the best sets that do require you to run dungeons or trials to farm them, so be on the lookout for that. And do keep in mind, this is just a small list of my favorites. There are plenty of other sets out of the hundreds available that are more than viable, especially if you might be running a build that is a little more niche. So if you are using something that's not listed here, that doesn't mean it's a bad set. End of the day, play the way that you enjoy and always tweak your builds for your specific setup. But with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, starting at number 10, we have the craftable set Heartland Conqueror. The crafting station for this is in the Blackwood zone, but you can also craft it at a house if the homeowner has the attunable station for it, or as with all craftable sets, you could have someone else craft it for you or purchase it with gold from a guild trader. The bonuses are weapon and spell damage, max magicka, max stamina, and the 5-piece bonus is increase the effectiveness of your weapon traits by 100%. This does not affect ornate or intricate traits. This is one of my favorite sets from a design standpoint. The thing I think is really cool is that you are essentially able to choose your 5-piece bonus based on what traits you choose to use on your weapons. So I won't list every trait here, but these are some of the common ones used for PvE DPS, with the numbers varying based on the type of weapon the trait is on. And so whatever you see here will be doubled with the Heartland Conqueror career bonus. So I thought I'd share a few common PvE trait loadouts, and we can quickly look at what the overall bonuses from Heartland will be depending on which one you're going with. The first one here is if you had a precise front bar with a two-handed weapon like a greatsword, a bow, or a staff, for example. And this does include the standard setup of having an infused back bar with the weapon damage glyph, and so the first line on there includes the 2-piece bonus that Heartland gives, plus the additional weapon and spell damage you'll be getting from that glyph on your back bar from it boosting infused. So not anything too mind-blowing with this setup, but decent stats all around. So I think where this set shines a little more is with a dual wield front bar option, as using a Nerien'eth main hand gets you 400 weapon and spell damage instead of the 200 that it normally gives. Plus the offhand trait, whichever one you choose, gets doubled as well. So I won't read through each of these here, but you get the point. You can kind of set it up to your own needs. Is it the strongest DPS option out there? No, but it's definitely competitive with some other options. And one version of this I think really uniquely shines is the charged offhand version, especially if you're using it on a Dragonite. I think this is one of the best starter sets out there for PvE DPS for DKs. The reason being is that Dragonites have a unique passive called Combustion, and this passive increases the damage of the burning and poisoned status effects, and also gives back resources whenever you trigger these passives. So running this type of setup with the charged offhand is a massive increased chance to proc these status effects and synergizes really well on a Dragonite. There are a couple of other cool things about this set I wanted to point out as well before we move on. So the 5-piece bonus is always 100% no matter the quality of your gear. So even if you had this in all blue or purple gear on the body, as long as your weapons are golded out, you are still getting that maximum 5-piece bonus. It is dependent on your weapons though, because weapon traits do scale up based on gear quality, but usually weapons are the first thing that are recommended to be golded out. So no worries if you don't have the gold to get all the body gear done as well, as long as your weapons are there. The other cool thing is that this set boosts the training trait on your weapons as well, so you can get a bonus 9% experience for each enemy you kill if you're running training weapons. So a great option for trying to level up those champion points a little bit faster, or maybe leveling a new character. Overall, I think this set is generally a bit overlooked for PvE and underrated as a good early option for PvE DPS. Really solid set on most classes, and especially nice on Dragonites going the charged route. Moving on to number 9, we have Briarheart. This is a medium overland set that drops in Hrothgar. Like all overland sets, it can also be purchased with gold from guild traders. The bonuses are crit chance, max stamina, more crit chance, and for the 5-piece, when you deal critical damage, you increase your weapon damage and spell damage by 450 for 10 seconds. While this effect is active, your critical strikes heal you for X health. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds, and the heal scales off the higher of your maximum magicka or stamina. So for those that are new to how stat lines work in ESO, crit chance is a little weird in how they present it, so I won't go too in-depth into how it works in this video, but essentially if you want to know how much crit chance a stat line is giving you, just divide it by 219. So you'll see here the standard bonuses of 657 crit chance are worth 3%. Crit is generally the most sought after 2 through 4-piece stat line on gear, followed closely by weapon and spell damage. Penetration can also be really great if needed, or wasted if you don't need it. And then magicka or stamina is generally the weakest of the damage stat lines. So moving back to Briarheart in particular, the stamina bonus on the 3-piece, it does hurt this set a bit if you're going the magicka stacking route, as you won't have any extra damage from the stamina line there, but really solid stats all around here on Briarheart for a stamina based character. And it's still okay for a magicka character, just not as ideal. If you are going the magicka route, Burning Spellweave is a pretty similar concept and has the magicka line on it instead of the stamina line. It does require you to farm it from City of Ash, which is a 4-person dungeon, so that's why it's not included in this video, but it is a pretty easy base game dungeon that doesn't require any DLC, so I thought it was at least worth mentioning here. So back to Briarheart, the 5-piece bonus is really excellent for short encounters, so anytime your target is dying within that 10-second window in which you have the 450 weapon and spell damage, your effective stats from this set are going to be really nice. Where this set starts to lose its appeal is over a longer fight, as the 5 seconds of downtime you get will eventually cause this set to average out closer to just 300 weapon and spell damage for that 5-piece bonus. Still not awful by any means, but longer fights are definitely not where this set shines. It is one of the more interesting options for shorter burst though. And then the heal in the 5-piece is not anything too crazy, but if you do have enough abilities ticking, those little ticks can definitely start to add up to a noticeable incoming heal. Overall, pretty solid set for stamina characters, especially early on, and an okay set for magicka characters. Next up at number 8, we have Hexos' Ward. This is another medium overland set, this one found in the Deadlands. The set bonuses are crit chance, weapon and spell damage, and crit chance, so just about as good as it gets for the 2 through 4 piece bonuses. And then the 5 piece is dealing direct critical damage grants you a damage shield that absorbs up to 12,305 damage for 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 7 seconds. So this does proc from direct crit damage, so damage over time ticks won't keep it up, but the shield you get from it is pretty massive. It does come with the trade-off though that there isn't any damage on that 5 piece bonus. Luckily the 2 through 4 piece bonuses are really good to help make up for it. If that shield wasn't as hefty as it is, I probably wouldn't have put it on this list, but the size is pretty massive. I mean, that's going to be over half of your health pool added as a damage shield in most players' cases. This set should be really nice to help get through vet content for the first time. Maybe you're trying to do the solo vet Maelstrom or Vateshran Hollows arenas. This could help give you that edge that you need to stay in the fight. Or if you already know the content pretty well and you're going for a no death achievement, maybe this could help to shore that up. One other cool thing here is that the Bastion CP in the fitness tree, the one that increases shield sizes by 15%, this does also work here on this set. So you can see after applying that, the shield goes up to 14,150. Really big shield. So definitely has the drawback of missing out on damage from the 5 piece bonus, but the upside of a really fat shield plus nice 2 through 4 piece bonuses. Solid set all around and can be used on any class or spec. Moving on to number 7, we have War Maiden. This is a light overland set found in Vardenfell. The bonuses are crit chance, max magicka, weapon and spell damage, and then the 5 piece bonus adds 600 weapon and spell damage to your magic damage abilities. So unlike some of the previous sets, this one will be a bit class specific and definitely better suited on magicka specs as well. The 2 classes that this is really viable on are Templar and Nightblade. And that's because when the 5 piece bonus says magic damage abilities, it means abilities that specifically deal magic damage. So this doesn't include flame, shock, frost, etc. Templars and Nightblades both have a lot of pure magic damage abilities in their kits, and so this can work pretty well. Nightblades, I'd say this is probably just an average set, not really anything special, but you'll find on Templars this is definitely above average and one of the better options that they can run, even comparing to some of the harder to get sets in the game. It boosts most of their class dots, their main spammable, puncturing sweep, and their execute too. You do lose out on your light attack damage not getting boosted, which hurts the set a bit, and also any weapon line dots you might be running, such as Unstable Wall, that won't be boosted either because they aren't pure magic damage. If over half of your damage is magic damage, I'd say this could be pretty solid. If over 2/3 of your damage is magic, then this is a pretty strong option for you. Now, to clarify, I don't mean add up how many skills you have because that doesn't necessarily mean so much, but you have to include how much damage those skills are doing, including your light attacks and all of that. Unfortunately, not really a way to check that on console versions, so you'll have to guesstimate a bit. But overall, okay set for Magicka Nightblades and pretty good set for Magicka Templars. Next up at number 6, we have Frostbite, another overland set here, this one found in Blackwood. This primarily comes in light armor, but you can also get it in some other weights from certain quest rewards in Blackwood. So kind of cool there, you can customize it a bit based on what weights you want. For the set bonuses, we have weapon and spell damage, crit chance, weapon and spell damage, so really great 2 through 4 piece bonuses. And then for the 5 piece, increases your damage done with frost abilities by 8%, increases your damage done against chilled enemies by 4%, increases your damage done against enemies afflicted with minor brittle by 2%. So like the previous set War Maiden, Frostbite is pretty narrow with the setups that it works for and has Frost Mage written all over it. Specifically for Frost Warden builds, this can perform really well. Wardens already synergize with frost damage better than other classes due to their 10% increase to frost damage, and they have a really nice frost AoE ability, Winter's Revenge. So if you want to go the Ice Staves route, you also have access to Unstable Wall of Frost and the really nice spammable ability, Frost Reach. With this kind of setup, you pretty much have 100% uptime on the chilled and minor brittle debuffs that are mentioned here on that tooltip. For those that don't know, chilled is a status effect from frost damage that lasts 4 seconds each time it is triggered, and minor brittle is a debuff that happens when you proc chilled and you are using an ice staff. If you have an ice staff on, those both happen at the same time. And then the chilled gives minor maim and the minor brittle gives an extra 10% crit damage to the enemy that has it on them. And then Wardens also have a unique 10% crit damage done to enemies that are chilled as well, so automatically 20% crit damage there from having the chilled and minor brittle going. So yeah, like I said, with the Frost Warden setup, 100% uptime on those are pretty easy, so that is a 6% damage increase there. And then for the frost damage increase of 8%, you won't have 100% of your damage being frost. Usually it's topping out somewhere around 50 to 60% depending on your setup. So let's just say 50% of your damage is frost. Well, that makes the 8% bonus essentially a 4% bonus overall, giving you a nice 10% total damage increase from the 5-piece bonus. Pretty great overall if you are speccing into this kind of setup. I don't think that this set gets as much attention as it deserves for PvE. Really nice if you're wanting to do that Ice Warden route, and would be number 1 on this list if you find yourself in that kind of setup. Next up at number 5, we have New Moon Acolyte. This is a craftable set from Southern Elsewhere, and again, all of these sets can be purchased with gold from guild traders. The set bonuses are crit chance, weapon and spell damage, penetration, and then the 5-piece bonus adds 401 weapon and spell damage, increases the cost of your active abilities by 5%. So this one is pretty straightforward compared to some of the others we've gone through, just solid flat stats all the way through. Since it is craftable, you can get it in any weight and set it up however you need. It does have that drawback of the increased cost of your abilities, so if sustain is already a struggle for you, maybe not the best option here. But especially with the upcoming Ascending Tide DLC, you can balance the magicka and stamina abilities you're using pretty well. You shouldn't be running into too many sustain issues, and the bonuses here are pretty solid all around. Not really much more to say on this one. It's pretty straightforward. You can use this for nice damage on really any class or spec. Alright, at number 4 we have Plague Break. This is a medium set sourced through the rewards for the worthy mails that you get from PvP. It is also purchasable on the guild traders like the other sets. The set bonuses are penetration, weapon and spell damage, more weapon and spell damage, and the 5-piece bonus is dealing direct damage to an enemy who is not a plague carrier turns them into a plague carrier for 10 seconds, dealing X disease damage over the duration. If the plague is removed early, it explodes, infecting enemies within 8 meters of the carrier and dealing X disease damage. The explosion deals an additional 50% damage per enemy hit. This effect can occur once per attack and scales off the higher of your weapon or spell damage. So as of the Deadlands DLC, they changed the part of the condition that reads if the plague is removed early to now include if the target dies as well, opening up the doors for PvE use for this set. I did a whole video covering Plague Break. If you want to check that out, I'll have it linked down in the description, so I won't go as in detail here as I did on that one, but it is one of my favorite sets in the game right now to use on a DPS. So essentially the damage on this set for single target is not too great. The dot is pretty small, but that really isn't the point of the set. Where I love to use this is situations where there are lots of adds stacked together. The more enemies grouped up, the higher that explosion goes off for. And you can really start a chain reaction with a bunch exploding at once. Definitely not a set it and forget it for all types of encounters kind of set, but where it works, it does its job really, really well. On to number 3, we have Deadly Strike. This is another medium set, also PvP sourced through the Bruma vendor in Cyrodiil or through a guild trader for gold. The bonuses are weapon and spell damage, crit chance, weapon and spell damage, and then the 5 pieces increase the damage your damage over time and channeled abilities do by 15%. This is another set that is limited in its use, but works really well on Templars as both their main spammable and their execute abilities are considered channels. So not only is this boosting those, but also all of the dots that they cast. 15% is a pretty hefty boost, so you'll see this set used on Templars at the highest levels of gameplay in ESO. So it is kind of nice that if you find yourself on a Templar, one of the best sets that you can get your hands on can be grabbed with no farming required. And Deadly Strike isn't limited to Templars per se, but no other class spammable is a channel, so you don't commonly see other classes running this. However, if you are running a pretty dot heavy build on another class and using the dual wield spammable flurry that is also boosted by this, while this is not as commonly seen in in-game setups, if you are going this route, you might see Deadly Strike as one of the better performing options for you. But definitely as a Templar, I'd say this is a must to pick up and would be number 1 on this top 10 list. Moving on to number 2, we have Mechanical Acuity. This is a craftable set in the Clockwork City. The bonuses are max stamina, max magicka, weapon and spell damage, and then for the 5-piece, when you deal non-critical damage, you gain a stack of Mechanical Acuity for 4 seconds, granting you 20% critical chance per strike up to once every 1 second and stacking up to 5 times. Upon reaching max stacks or after the effect ends, this effect cannot occur again for 25 seconds. This is another set that is limited in its use, but very powerful all the way to the highest levels of gameplay. Essentially, the best way to build for this set is to focus other stats besides crit chance, and then let this set take care of all of that crit for you. So with each non-critical strike you deal, you get the 20% crit chance increase, and that adds up until the point where you are critting on every strike for 4 seconds straight, and then it drops off. It does have a pretty long cooldown, so this is kind of a no-go for longer encounters, but it really shines as a burst something down quick kind of set. You will commonly see mechanical acuity used in AoE trash setups, as well as builds for bosses that can be nuked down quickly in a coordinated manner. Opening up with an ultimate such as Fiery Rage from the Destro line and then triggering the set so that you are mostly critting on all of your strikes is a great way to get some satisfying nukes on enemies. But this is another set that isn't good to just run everywhere, as the average crit chance you get from it over a longer fight is pretty low with that long cooldown period. But if you do like swapping to different setups for different scenarios, this is pretty great for even the highest levels of PvE gameplay. Alright, before we get to number 1, I wanted to quickly touch on a few honorable mentions. Some solid sets here that didn't quite make my top 10 list, but I thought were at least worth bringing up. We have Hunting's Rage and Julianos, which are both craftable with some nice flat stats across the board. Essentially, they are slightly less powerful versions of the New Moon Acolyte set that we went over earlier, but with no negative aspects like the cost increase that New Moon has. Unfathomable Darkness is a medium overland set from the Clockwork City. This has pretty nice 2 through 4 piece bonuses and nice proc damage from the 5 piece bonus. The main couple of drawbacks are it's single target only for the damage you get from the summoned crows, and because they target the nearest enemy, sometimes they will go to a side target that you might not intend for them to. Still pretty nice damage for an easy to get overland set. Silks of the Sun is a light overland set from Stonefalls that is really solid on Dragonites, as it gives a nice 400 weapon and spell damage boost to your flame abilities. And most all abilities in a DK's kit are going to be flame damage. Not best in slot, but a great easy to get early set if you're playing a Dragonite. Way of Martial Knowledge is a light overland set from Craglorn. This is an honorable mention because it's more of a support set than a DPS set, though you do often see DPS in charge of running it in high-end PvE content. You'll often see it used this way when you can't fit it onto one of the support roles in the group. Kind of a pain to keep up with the 50% threshold that your stam needs to stay under, but does provide a nice boost to the group DPS in 12-person trials. And then finally, for the last of the honorable mentions, we have Elfbane. This is another set that works really well on Dragonites. Unfortunately, it has the downside that it is a heavy set. You can run it on the jewelry and weapons to get around this drawback, but as the 5-piece bonus extends the length of your flame damage abilities, it is the kind of bonus you want active on both of your bars, and therefore if you run it on the weapons, you give up the option to run arena weapons. It's either that or lose some offensive stats by using 2 heavy body pieces. It does synergize really well with the Dragonite though, and can be really fun to have some crazy long flame dot abilities. One other use that works really well too is for those that like to swap to different gear setups for different encounters. You can run this on the back bar to boost your Fiery Rage ultimate from 7 seconds up to 12 seconds. This can be really nice for certain quick encounters that maybe last a little bit longer than a normal Destro ult would go for, but are still short enough where it's not ending much longer after that now 12-second Destro ult would be ending. So pretty niche use there, but can be pretty fun for some crazy high Fiery Rage damage. Alright, we are finally at number 1 on the list, and as some of you might have already guessed, we have Mother's Sorrow. This is a light overland set found in Deshawn. For the bonuses, we have Max Magicka, Crit Chance, and more Crit Chance. This set has been around for a really long time and was pretty much the meta for a few years straight. And while it isn't quite the best of the best options in the current iteration of the game, it is still pretty dang close. Crit Chance is usually the best stat you can go for in PvE, and this set is loaded with it. And though it doesn't give quite as much as a couple of other options in the game, it doesn't have any kind of build-up period. It is just always active in its full amount. It does have the Max Magicka line, so a little more ideal for Magicka builds. However, there is a stamina counterpart of this set called Leviathan, and this one is a medium set found in the Crypt of Hearts dungeon. It has the same stats as Mother's Sorrow, except a stamina line instead of a Magicka line, so if you are going the stam route, this would be a slightly better option for you than Mother's Sorrow. Because it is a dungeon set, it didn't make the top 10 list, but I'm going to cheat a little and still include it here with Mother's Sorrow, since they are essentially the same set. That plus Crypt of Hearts is an early early base game dungeon that's pretty easy to run and farm if you want to put the set together. But yeah, not really too much more to say about either of these, just flat stats that work on really any class or spec you want and more than good enough to get you through pretty much all levels of content in the game. Great options if you don't want to worry about changing sets around for different encounters and you just want something that you can rely on that will work well pretty much everywhere. That's going to do it for this one. Sorry if I missed a set that you love. There are just so many in the game now, it's hard to pack them all into a short list like this. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks to those that have subscribed to the channel. We are quickly approaching 40k subs now with 50k around the corner. I can't thank y'all enough for the support. I will be doing a 50k crown giveaway in ESO as a thank you when we do finally hit that 50k sub mark, so if you aren't subbed and you want to help us get there a little quicker, that would be amazing. Subbing on YouTube is free and you can always change your mind later if you're no longer interested in the content. A big thanks to my current Patreon supporters and YouTube members. If you want to see how you can help support to keep these guides coming, totally optional, but there will be a link in the description. There's options for as little as $3. And a special thanks to Nicholas, Simon, Cougars Bay in the Cougar City Guild, the Order of War Guild, Iffy, Cantankerous Cat, Shady, BlakeWin816, Mordecai1212, and my wonderful wife. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.